La nostra industria sta cambiando. Diversità, equità, inclusione. Facciamo un punto. Sono Roberta Mariani e questo è Balanced.
Welcome to the third episode of Balance. I'm super excited for two new guests today with us. We got Dave Broom and Francesca Nonino, two amazing experts on their categories. We're talking about dark spirits, whiskey, and we're talking about grappa. Lovely to have you, Dave and Francesca. Thank you for finding the time.
I'm so excited. Thank you so much.
Delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So today's topic is going to be about stereotypes, gender stereotypes in the spirit industry. And I couldn't think of better person than you two to have this conversation. But let's start easy. So the first question is going to be, what motivates you to pursue your career in the spirit industry? And how did you start it? Francesca, would you like to start?
I will be the first one. Okay. I will be
Please.
The one. First thing I want to say that I'm Italian, so sorry for my English, I will try my best. But I think that what really pursued me to starting this career was the fact that for me, the example of my family was so inspiring because I'm the sixth generation of a family of grappa distillers since 1897. And I've grown in a family where I had my mom, my aunt, my grandmother, my grandfather all working in this distillery, and I saw them not working, having a life mission to make people understand how grappa could be amazing. And I been raised listening to this story about my grandmother and my grandfather that proved to the world how grappa was not this fire water but could be the essence of the grape put in the final glass, creating the first single varietal grappa, the modo Nonino. And I was just like, oh my God, this is so beautiful. And looking at my grandfather distilling, looking at the eyes, the type of passion my grandmother put into communicating grappa, I was just like, I want to be part of this as well. And I really wanted that in a sort of way. I was like so excited and terrified at the same time because I was like, oh my God, my family did so good. It's still doing so good. Will I be good enough to be part of the Nonino family, to be able to take this legacy and keep it going? And so I started work, and at the beginning I was just like, in Italian we would say a tappabuchi. I don't know how to say that in English. How to translate that, Roberta?
I'm not sure. It means like a hustler, someone that's trying to do different things and then is giving help when they need it.
Exactly. So like at the beginning, I was just doing that, trying to understand more about the company, because of course I've been raised listening to the story of this family. But one thing is to listen, one thing is to be part of it, two completely different things. And then even if my study were completely different from what I'm doing right now, because I study economics and finance, I thought that I could bring something that what I could bring into this distillery in my family history was a new way of communicating grappa, because I thought I know that grappa is amazing. I can see that, I can taste that. The only problem is that we need to communicate it in a different way, because about stereotypes, a lot of people think that grappa is the spirit for all people. It's not true. Grappa is unbelievable. It's exciting. It's fun. It's delicious. It's versatile. And I thought maybe if I try to show grappa to the people how I see grappa, I can change this thing. And so I became the grappa influencer.
You definitely did. I think listening you to talk with so much passion is so contagious. I love it. It's really inspiring. And when we're talking about communicating about category, Dave, let's ask the same question to you. If there is someone that communicate and brought a lot about the whiskey, is definitely you. So how did you start? Why you pursued the career in the spirit?
Yeah, I mean, I left university. I studied English, and I always wanted to write. But when I left uni, which is back in the 80s, I'm very old, there weren't really any jobs about. I got a job in a wine merchant. I was selling wine, in a shop. But still wanted to write about music eventually. and then a job came up on a drinks trade weekly, and I'd kind of writing experience, but I also got wine exams. And I'd begun to kind of play around with spirits, but the joy of that career, those 7 years where I was features editor, was I was writing about everything from water to grappa to beer to whiskey to whatever. So it gave me a very good grounding in, I suppose, the business side of it. But this was in the late 80s, beginning of the 90s. And that was when premium spirits just began to grow. Single malt was beginning to suddenly appear from essentially not really existing as a category. Cocktail bars were beginning to open in London, where, there were no cocktail bars really, and certainly not for people of my generation. So I was in the right place at the right time. So when I went freelance, which was 95, I pretty much began specialising in spirits at that point, because there was this huge world to explore. And there were very few writers. There was my great friend and mentor, Michael Jackson, my dear friend, Charlie MacLean. And that was it, really, writing about whiskey. And there was very few people writing about spirits as a whole. But all these stories, just what Francesca was saying, all these stories, the passion, the people, the history, the heritage, the places it was made, just this world of opportunity was there. So I count myself extremely lucky to have been around wanting to do this at that particular time. And it's just been a great career. I've never stopped learning.
I think we are the one lucky that you started the career, because your contribution is definitely something that is worth it. I remember starting the career as a bartender like 15 years ago, and reaching out to books and articles, all these kind of things. And it was, let's say, the only way to really absorb knowledge at the time. The internet wasn't so spread. It was not easy to find information. So having books and really good writing, it was essential. So now I want to really deep dive with you with the topic of today. We're going to talk about gender stereotypes. And I think those categories, they are some of the categories that see most views of stereotypes. Spirits brands may use gender stereotypes in the marketing and the advertising, targeting women with a sweet, fruity cocktail and the man with the smoky, really dark spirits. That reinforces this bias, and obviously they can discourage people for trying different things because they don't feel then belong to that categories of people. They should appreciate the spirits. So you both work in two of the categories, the whiskey and the dark spirits and the grappa. They have a really, really strong gender affiliation. So are the gender-based differences in the way they affect how the people consume the spirits, in your opinion?
We'll start. Go, Dave. Your turn.
Okay. Well, I mean, I feel somewhat stereotyped myself. I'm an old Scottish man with a grey beard talking about whiskey with some antlers on the wall behind me. What could be more cliched and stereotyped than that? I do think that whiskey, I'm speaking about Scottish whiskey in particular, but I think whiskey in general, and probably cognac as well, has been stereotyped. I do agree. It's been sold and thought of, I think, as a male drink. I think the advertising has changed significantly in recent years. I think the overtly sexist advertising that you saw in the 60s and 70s, maybe up until the 80s, that now has basically ceased, certainly within the Scotch whisky category as a whole. But it doesn't mean that the image of whisky hasn't changed. But I think the point is really that whiskey has been gendered for like hundreds of years. So it is very hard to begin to unpick all of that and to say, whiskey is actually for everyone. But it doesn't mean that those attempts aren't being made. And I think it's fascinating for me to see when I go around the world going to whiskey shows, especially, the way in which the demographic balance has shifted over the past, say, 10 years, 20 years, whereas they were very much male-dominated in some countries. In others, you're seeing a 50-50 split about attendees. You're seeing a 50-50 split in terms of who's drinking, women drinking, as well as men. You're seeing a younger generation coming in. And I think a lot of it is down to a generational shift. You know, when I was growing up, you know, whiskey was a male drink, and it was drunk by people over 35. This is what I was always told when I began writing. Probably in realistic terms, probably the whiskey drinker of the 70s and 80s and 90s was probably 50 plus, and it was a man. And if you look at what's happening now, certainly within the Scotch whisky category, and I would argue with bourbon as well, what you're seeing is many more women coming in, that average age beginning to come dramatically down. It's probably late 20s, maybe early 30s. So change is undoubtedly on the way. Does more work need to be done? Yes, because I think it's not the industry, not the advertiser. I think it's just a general inbuilt, ingrained perception the whiskey and dark spirits are for men. But it is changing, and I think it's changing for the good. But we've still got a long way to go.
The changing, I think, is already like a step forward. I completely agree with what you say.
Absolutely. And I think it's really positive. You know, I mean, if you know, I judge it cocktail competitions, you know, and the way in which, you know, whiskey is in there, but, you know, there's more women coming through, etc. You know, the whole area, you know, of hospitality and the whole area of the drinks industry is really taking this on board, and change is happening. So it's positive.
This is really good. And Francesca, what's your experience in the category of grappa?
So, like, honestly, this is like a really important topic for me, because even if I am Francesca Nonino, 6th generation of Nonino family, blah, 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 and I'm almost 33 years old, even nowadays, I have people that question me, be like, but do you really drink grappa? Like, it's like for a lot of people, because I'm a young woman, like, it's impossible for me to be able to enjoy grappa. But thank God, this is only a big stereotype. In fact, I'm really happy to be able to say that Nielsen data show that grappa Nonino consumer are the grappa consumer with the highest percentage of female, and even with a higher percentage of young people that consuming, of course, with the right age for drinking, they consume our grappa. I think that in a sort of way there are this huge stereotype that make some women even scared with the idea they may actually enjoy this spirit, because it's just like, it's grappa, I'm not allowed to be able to drink that because it's a strong spirit for male. But I have to say that I'm really happy because nowadays in the spirit industry there are more and more female professionists, and I think that the biggest difference into the possibility of enjoying a spirit is knowledge. I think that when people know the history of a product, they are more willing to try different type of thing. They're more willing to challenge themselves in new spirit, and even with different type of taste. So I don't want to say that female prefer fruity, sweeter stuff, and male prefers smokier, darker type of taste spirit. But I think that people without a strong knowledge in spirit prefer fruitier, sweeter stuff, and people that know really well spirit prefer more complex type of taste.
I would say, yeah, undoubtedly. I think it's a shift in the palate. It's the way that people learn. You know, it's got nothing to do with whether you're male or female. You know, it's just it's the human palate. I think. And you know, just picking up on what you were saying there, Francesca. That, I mean, I've certainly noticed that. You know, talking to colleagues working behind the stands at whiskey shows, they're often asked that, oh my goodness, you know, you're just standing there as a piece of eye candy. You know, do you really like whiskey? Well, yeah, I actually make it. You know, I'm one of the blenders or whatever. And I think that is, I know we're going to talk about the industry, and I think that's the big difference between what the industry is doing and what that consumer perception is. And the people who are asking these questions and making these assumptions tend to be of that older generation. So I think, again, this shift in demographic, this generational shift that's taking place is going to help the situation immensely. But again, you know, it's going to take a few years to work itself out. But
yeah, but also, like, I think that now younger generation that are allowed to drink alcohol are much more professionals than the older generation when they were younger. Like, what I mean is that thank God nowadays consumer, even the younger one, is not willing just to drink for drinking, but they want to have an experience. They want to know what they're drinking. They're more into the idea of drink less but drink better. And I think this is the ideal consumer to deal with because they're really willing to try different type of thing. And I think that overall, knowing that when they're drinking a certain type of spirit, they are experiencing, they're tasting a specific culture, tradition, history of a country is a big plus. And I think this is amazing because actually with a spirit, you're really tasting a culture.
Yep, I agree 100%. It's what I write about, what I'm fascinated about more than anything else. Absolutely, I couldn't agree more.
This is so true. I think consumers today, they're getting more and more knowledgeable. For me, there were no better times to be a bartender. Imagine that you have a guest coming at the bar asking for a cocktail martini, for a sbagliato, Manhattan. They can name the name of the brand of whiskey that they want. They can name the name of the grappa. They're looking for this complexity that we were talking about. Before, it wasn't so easy. So I think for today, to be a bartender, you got the opportunity to have a challenge on the other side. So you need to prepare yourself even more because people that are going to sit in front of you, they're not just going to take anything that you're going to offer, but they actually already have a certain knowledge on their side. So I think education and what you're doing, especially Francesca, you're a young woman, and with the use of social media, I think you're reaching like a new generation of consumers too. That's why the demographic is slowing, shifting towards the more youngers. I think this is important for us, as important for for the bar industry in general, to do education, to try to let people understand then the preference in the taste that may be more connected to age and experiences than the genders. But this is something that we need to work slowly towards. And now I'm going to my next question, because we're talking about the changes in industry, what is happening. And I think one of the other problem on stereotypes related to genders is the fact that women sometimes they don't have the same recognition inside of certain categories. I would like to know about your experience. And definitely, I'm going to start asking Francesca, but then Dave as well. In the whiskey world, I think there are a lot of emails coming out, so I want to hear that as well. But let's go back to Francesca. Your experience in women in the leadership, because I know you're really vocal about it.
So for me, I have to say that it was pretty tough because I have two big problem being in this sector. First thing, I'm in a family business. So for a lot of people, just because you're working for your family business, it means that everything was given to you, just like, I don't know how to say that in English, but è come se fosse una pioggia d'acqua fresca in Italian. It's just like they just think that because you are born in a family, that means that you're gonna have the smoothest career path and not any type of problem at all. And second thing, I'm a woman, and I see this is another issue. So for me, it was really hard to find my own place in the business and find my own voice in a sort of way. Because at the beginning, when I started working, I noticed that people were treating me almost as if I was not knowledgeable until I proved that I was. So this is the reason why I became a sommelier. This is the reason why I also took the WSET third level for wine and also the WSET second level for spirit, because I wanted to be able to put on my business card that I knew the thing that we're talking about. Because at the beginning, I remember in my career, people were always asking me tricky questions to be able to see if I was able to answer. They were always questioning my knowledge. Or if I was in a group of people talking about this industry, most of the time, the adults, the most important people in the room, were not even looking at me, just thinking that I had nothing to offer, that my experience, my knowledge was worth nothing. So I study a lot to be able to take this certificate. I have to say that I'm pretty competitive in a sort of way, in a good competitive way. I mean that I was seeing that when I was going in the United States to travel, a lot of the people that were bringing me in the liquor store to see clients, they were putting really proudly on their business card that they were WSET second level in wine. So I was like, you know what? I will do the third level. So I will really prove that I know what I'm talking about. And that helped me a lot, I have to say. And also gave me, in a sort of way, to have this certificate gave me a different type of trust in myself. Because sometimes when you're a woman and you're working in a family business, it's also easier not to trust that you're good enough. And you need to believe that to be able to feel like you deserve to to share your opinion, to share your ideas, to have your voice being listened. I don't know if it makes sense.
It does. I related so much that it's almost painful to hear it. I know what does it mean, that you always need to prove yourself, even when you think, okay, I've done enough, like I'm here talking, but at the same time, you're always going to find the person questioning why you're there. And it's just because certain stereotypes. Completely understand. So I'm sharing the feeling. So Dave, let's talk about representation and recognition of women in the industry from one point of view. What have you seen in the years, and what's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I think it's, it's dreadful, hearing what you had to go through, and indeed still go through, Francesca. I think it's a dreadful thing that people still have to kind of prove themselves. It's ridiculous. So hopefully that also will be part of the new agenda, and things will change around that. I do think, I've got slightly more positive message. Again, dealing with Scotch whisky as a whole, I think the industry's been very good, certainly in recent years, with gender representation. Maureen Robinson, I'm going to have a big list of names here. Maureen Robinson retired last year from Diageo. She was a master blender at Diageo, and she'd been working there for 45 years, looking after stocks and then blending. But she was part of a team. She was working with Caroline Martin, whose last job was doing Roe Distillery in Dublin, which is run by a woman, run by Laura Hemy. Emma Walker took over from Jim Beveridge as master blender of Johnnie Walker, which is the biggest job in whisky production in Scotland. Amy Gibson is working in that team as well. You've got Stephanie McLeod at George, you've got Kirstine Campbell at Macallan, you've got Rachel Barry, Gillian MacDonald, Kelsey Ramage, Julianne Fernandez. You've got distillers like Polly Logan and Kirsty Dagnan, Georgie Crawford, Caroline. In the independent bottling sector, Annabelle Thomas owns Nella Distillery, which is the first organic distillery in Scotland. And I'm just back from a trip to New Zealand, and my friend Tash McGill over there, who's a great writer, she pointed out that 70% of the distilleries in New Zealand are either owned by women or co-owned by women. And Cardrona Distillery, a whisky distillery in the South Island of New Zealand, is a team which is all female distillers. So I wasn't just picking these names out. The fact is, within the Scotch whisky industry, nobody is raising an eyebrow that there are women distillers and women master blenders and etc. etc. So I think that role of women within whisky as being on, say, the PR side or just tour guides, etc., etc., I think that is gone. So it's not an exception to find women within the Scotch whisky industry, and that is great, and that's a really, really positive move, and it's a relatively recent one. Again, thinking back to when I was starting writing in the 80s and 90s, I would be going around distilleries, there would not be a woman in sight, and probably other than Maureen and later Caroline and then Rachel, really nobody in that position of blending within whisky. So the change has happened, and change has happened relatively quickly, and it is continuing to happen. I think that the fact the new CEO of Diageo is a woman is probably evidence of that as well. So things are moving, things are changing. So yeah, positive. It's never perfect. More things have to change, but yeah, much more positive outlook in terms of Scotch, certainly.
Yes, so true. Like all the names that you were just not dropping names, but this is the reality of the industry, and probably because there was like a lot of focus on the whiskey category in the past years because it was so associated with the masculinity. Then maybe it's the category they act stronger than any other one, just to prove that actually that is more inclusive than what we think about, or what consumers think about. So definitely really proud.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, Roberta. Again, it comes back to that earlier point that the industry is actually doing a huge amount in terms of just saying, well, if you're qualified for that job, then you're qualified for that job. It doesn't matter, what gender you are, you're fine. It's because of your inherent talent. It's that perception that is in the back of people's minds that is stopping, that is continuing to stop. Or continue to perpetuate rather than the stereotypes. So I don't think it's actually coming from the industry. I think the industry now has to do even more work to try and change people's minds, because the industry, again, I'm dealing particularly with whiskey here. The industry is doing a huge amount of work.
Interesting. This brings me to something else that I've got in mind, because you're right. Probably the industry inside is trying to change, is proving that it's possible to do things in a different way, but maybe consumers, they are more resilient on like the stereotype bias than they've got in their mind. And I'm thinking about the advertising campaign, then the brand they put out. Most of them, they're really sexualized, or their gender stereotypes. I'm thinking about bad example, good example. We had the Jane Walker campaign a few years ago. We had the punk IPA. That was the same kind of beer, but just different pink packaging. And then we had some great one like the Heineken, where there was, men drink cocktails too. So I think in a certain way, it's different for it's different and difficult, I would say, for a brand to trying to attack the consumers, trying to challenge this bias, but at the same time bring them on board. And from here, my question for you. So what steps can the industry take to challenge this bias? Francesca.
I think that it's gonna be tricky, because at the end, I believe that the commercial reflect the society. So until we really want to have equality in our society, I think that they will be sexualizing women and stuff like that. But on the other hand, what I think that the industry can do is education. Even for example in the workplace, I think it would be really important to teach people about respecting their worker, like thought about equality in the workplace, and I believe that we need that. I don't think that it's something that will last forever, but I think that to give a good example, we need to show people that actually women can be in different type of position than in the stereotypical one. And so I think that will be really helpful in the long run, and then we will be able finally just to see people for their talent and not anymore for their gender.
True.
Yeah. Sorry, do you want me to?
Yes, please.
Sorry.
It was like a really long pause.
Yeah, that's fine. We can edit. We'll come out fine in the edit. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Jane Walker. Yeah, I mean, Jane Walker was a misstep, really, but it was an unusual one. It was done for the right reasons. Jane Walker, it was the idea, as far as I can remember. It was there to celebrate women in the industry. It was blended by women. It was blended by Emma. But the way it was spoken about it was a whiskey for women, which was completely the wrong thing to say. It was, so it was, the thinking was good, but the execution was wrong.
Yeah, it was actually to celebrate the equality and the woman month. Yeah. So they were all the right reason. Yeah. I appreciate the effort. It was just, I think, the translation of the execution didn't match the thinking.
Yeah, it was an unfortunate one, shall we say. Although, I mean, and I do think, and I think it's quite interesting, just noticing that the way that was then picked up, and the way that other overtly sexist advertising, which is coming out, I think, mainly from bourbon, to be perfectly honest. It's mostly come from the US in terms of the whiskey category. When one of those brands appears, or some of that advertising appears in the sector, it's immediately noticed and it's immediately, shot down, and quite rightly so. But the fact that it's immediately noticed means that the thinking has shifted, that people are now more conscious and more aware of that. And it also means that they are exceptions to the rule rather than the rule themselves. So again, incremental steps have been taken forward, to shift that idea of the advertising, the way in which things are targeted. It is by no means, however, classic. You still see, I rarely see, or I rarely get a press release saying it's Mother's Day. Why don't you buy your mother a bottle of whiskey? A couple of retailers did it this year, but I can be guaranteed that over the next month or so, I'm going to be bombarded with press releases going, "It's Father's Day. Why don't you get your dad this? And why don't you buy them it's whiskey and cigars and etc. etc." But it's just like, where are you guys? We've moved long away from all of that. So yeah, still a considerable amount of work to be done in that. I mean, in answer of how you can do it, yes, certainly in terms of workplace, I think that's a perfectly sensible. Everything you said there, Francesca, was I could not disagree with at all. I think non-gender advertising, gender neutral, just making it a gender neutral space for people to talk at. I think an end from PR companies, which is probably driven by marketing departments, to flagging up that this whiskey was made by a woman. Isn't that amazing? That needs to end. More support for women's whiskey clubs, for the platforms, etc., which I know is happening, but more needs to be done in that end. And certainly, and I think one of the most important things is calling out that sexist behaviour when it happens at shows and conferences and wherever. That if somebody says something bad to the person standing behind the stall, they are thrown out that show because they have overstepped that mark. And I think that has to be enforced and just make everything a safe space for everyone.
Great observation and great advice. I think speaking up, make sure that we stand for what we believe in is a great step to moving forward and really necessary in the industry. So it's not just coming from the people that may be affected from the changes, but also like people that they see things happening. Just stand up and speak up.
And it's also, I would say it's men that have to be aware of this. I'm honestly constantly brought up. My daughter's 21. She's of another generation, and just listening to what she says and the way that she picks up on things in the media, etc. That has taught me a huge amount about my behaviour or things that I haven't said. I think, well, that's wrong, but we'll just kind of let that go. In terms of men have an incredibly important responsibility to call this out.
Yes, also because I think that sexism doesn't affect only women, affect all people, and I think that we should stop thinking about sexism about a female issue. Is a world issue, people issue, and women and men need to be allied because it's like to have a society that it's all about equality brings more to everyone. Like it's better for everyone.
What a powerful message. And I think you really center it because it's not just about the woman, it's just giving everybody the freedom to be themselves. It's not specific to gender. If you want to be, I don't know, a 55 man from Scotland and you want to drink pina colada with like umbrella and glitter on it, you should be able to and feel free to order one and enjoy one without having constantly to be afraid of what people they're going to think about, how people they're going to associate or give you like credibility, connect to what your choice of drink. So completely agree on the fact that it needs to be like free for everybody. More equality, this is the main point. Now, I want you to share a message with the new generation. So which one will be your piece of advice for someone younger that wants to enter the spirit industry? Francesca.
to study a lot, to defensive thoughts, to be strong and to believe in yourself even when other people don't, because sometimes in this sector can be hard, but be brave enough to believe in yourself and to fight for what you want to do and for your dream. I think that's the best thing you can do.
Beautiful. Dave.
Yeah, I can't disagree with any of that. I would add, never be afraid to ask why. Why something is happening, why something is being done. It's a really useful little word, and you will learn a huge amount in terms of education and building yourself and understanding. Support each other. I think solidarity is really important in the workplace. If you're working in the world of hospitality, you're working in a team. So support each other and be kind to each other as well. It's a pretty brutal world out there, so you have to stick together. And I think the only way that we're going to continue to change this and change this stereotyping is by doing all of that, by supporting, by having solidarity and being kind to each other. Which sounds dreadfully wishy-washy and hippie, but I think it's true. You can be strong and still be kind.
I have a better one. Don't be afraid of bringing a new idea or have a different point of view, because it's like that you can bring innovation. Even when people at the beginning do not support you, if you really trust in what you're doing, never give up. Sorry.
No.
This is the type of suggestion I would give myself when I was younger. Sorry.
Yeah, I absolutely. Yeah, don't be scared. Don't be scared to jump in. And do what you think is the right thing to do, because even if it doesn't work out, at least you've given it a shot.
At least you tried.
Yeah.
Wow, what a message. I feel like inspiring. I'm gonna start something new tomorrow now after listening to you. So I think our time is at the end. Francesca, Dave, I'm so honored to have you. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and your thoughts. I hope this is going to help the industry to have a point of view on what is happening in the spirits category. And thank you again. I hope to see you soon. Big thank you.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Thank you. Ciao.
Come to us in our distillery. We're waiting for you. Thank you. And be brave.
We're all going to see Francesca. Let's go.
Yeah, we're off.
Ciao.
Off.
Sono Roberta Mariani e questo è Balanced.